Yes, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Earth 2 Comic Cast. We're back with another Lovecraft Country review and reaction. Episode 7, I Am. That is the episode that we're going to be reviewing today. But before we get into the episode, we'd like to thank you guys for watching. Whoever, the guys that watched the last episode, we'd like to thank you guys. We'd also like to thank you and ask you to like, share, and subscribe, right? That's not difficult.
And
Subscribe
we love it when you comment.
We do love it when you comment. As a matter of fact, we're going to address the comment that we got, or a couple comments that we got from that episode. So that you want to get into it, or do you want? I'm going to get into it. So
let's introduce ourselves first.
Yes, it is Mo Crosby, Earth 2, and you know who I'm doing this with. Go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
It's your boy KB, Kyle XY, Trap God with the Dadbod,
Trap God with the Dadbod, favorite goon.
What is it?
I'm giving you ad-libs.
Intellectual hate God.
Intellectual hate God.
Yes, it is I.
We got to give Kyle ad-libs when he's introducing himself. Kyle can't just get basic intros. I get the basic intro. Kyle gets the exciting intros. So the first comment that I'd like to talk about is the Game of Thrones was the greatest thing to happen to TV. Lovecraft is running up second place so far. Where?
This was my favorite episode.
Yes, I'll say. You know what? I will almost agree with you, and this is where I'll agree with you on. It looks good. It looks really, really good. When certain things happen halfway into the episode, I'm like, yo, this looks super great. It looks really great. Mm-hmm. The next comment I want to talk about is, y'all don't have an idea of what you're talking about. Your channel is garbage. Your views are too. Trying to sound smart, ending up sounding stupid. Stop hating. Wow. I feel I'm shocked. That one actually pierced my heart. I'm actually offended. So
I'm glad we had this troll call with this guy, because that comment was interesting.
Very.
Because when it comes to TV, right? And like I said, to me, this was my favorite episode of this show.
Mm-hmm.
You had when you're doing TV, any form of media, right? TV, movie, book, which I've had the pleasure of writing both books and writing a TV series, right?
Right.
You have to make things entertaining. It's one thing to make something intellectual.
Yes.
It's one thing to make something like super smart, filled with Easter eggs and clues and everything else like that. But it has to be entertaining. Watchmen, which I'm not even talking about the TV show, which is an amazing TV show, but the Watchmen book was it was filled with tons of propaganda. It was filled with tons of espionage, tons of everything, right? Political everything, right? And the thing that made Watchmen, the book, so intriguing was it was also entertaining.
Yes.
When you look at Marvel's formula or DC's formula, I'm not going to bash DC movies, right? But when you look at their formula of what they do, they still, like, even with all the Easter eggs, like Batman v Superman, there's tons of faults with that movie, but it was still entertaining.
Right.
It was entertaining, and they had Easter eggs for other stuff, like stuff that related to the comics. Oh, this is the Robin that was killed. Joker did kill. So this Batman already went through the death in the family. Like there was tons of Easter eggs, but it was also entertaining up front. Marvel gets things right all the time because they can give you an entertaining story, but give you tons of Easter eggs.
Right.
My problem with this show in the past was they either went nigger several times throughout the show, like bashing you over the head with racism to the point where it wasn't enjoyable. B, they left a lot of hanging threads in the show. A lot. It didn't click for whatever reason. C, for whatever reason, the character development with Tick just didn't seem to hit right. Meanwhile, Tick is a super interesting character. Like, I'm the reason why we're casting this show, because I went to Mo, like, Mo, this is a dope show. Let's watch the show. Like, so
Mo was already watching the show, and Mo was tired of it.
Right. I campaigned for the show, so it's not like I didn't come here to bash the show. But watching the show, I can't help but point out flaws. I'm a black man, and I'm very proud. If you look at my resume, which is way more stacked than yours, sir, who decided to take the time to hate mail me, I'm as pro-black as there gets, especially with all my work and all my efforts that I do in the black community.
Facts.
So if I bash something,
I can attest to that.
yeah, if I bash something, it's not that I'm trying to be bashing and hating. No, I'm just pointing out, hey, look, this just isn't good. Like you could do better. Just because something is super black doesn't mean that it's always super good. You have like you, it has
Right.
to be entertaining.
Because Watchmen is as black as it gets, or
Mm-hmm.
it focuses on the black character without saying, "Hey, look, it's a black character." What Lovecraft has tried to smartly do is focus on the black character. Also say, "Hey, look, this is a black character." Also say, "Hey, look, we're discussing racism," and it's like, "Yo, can we get it?" We no one who watches Lovecraft watches it and goes, "Oh, I don't understand what they're trying to talk about." We get it, but you're trying to you're ODing, you're overdoing, you're doing the most. You're not making it smart because you're trying to make it smart and it doesn't look smart, which is the comment he gave us. And the last one I want to talk about is, now I'm mad I gave y'all a view. Well, guess what? Mad Kid 623 BHN. Thank you for your view. I appreciate
Thank you.
it. I also appreciate the comment. So you know what? If you happen to see this episode, here you are. We're talking about you. And guess what? If you happen to view this episode, drop another comment. We might talk about it on the next show. So that is enough for Troll Call today. Let's get into,
And if you have, and anybody else who watches the show, if you have hateful comments and you want us to address you,
please,
please do so.
please.
We'll address you at the top of every top of every show
Right.
in the section that we call Troll Call. You're
Thank you very
welcome.
much. You're welcome. So now let's get into the episode of Lovecraft Country, episode 7. I am. See, Lovecraft Country has done something that has now made it very painfully obvious to me that we might have a good show inside of this mess, right? And the first 4 episodes, the first 5 episodes feature Tick and Letty and Uncle George in the first two, and then it's Tick and Letty and his dad and Montrose in the last couple. The thing with the Indiana Jones episode and then the other episode. So they've done a lot to feature Tick, and it seems to me every time. I think because again, what happened in the last episode where we talked about it and we said this episode felt great, but then as soon as they reminded us that this is a Lovecraft episode by adding Tick into the episode, it fell flat. This is another episode where in the beginning we get a lot of Tick, and then towards the end, the last 15-20 minutes, we get on Hippolyta, and it's like, oh, this is a good show. When you take the beginning of the show out and you focus in on that last 15 to 20 minutes of Hippolyta, I believe that's where the show excels. And the theme and the message it's trying to send in that last 15 minutes, on top of everything else that is Lovecraft, is in my opinion one of the better messages the show has sent.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I think that's where I fall in this episode. I like it at the end. I didn't, because Kyle had watched it and texted me. He was like, "Yo, Mo, this is a great episode." And when I'm watching it in the beginning of the episode, I'm like, "Great, where?" And then towards the end of the episode, I don't remember exactly what I texted you, but I texted you and I was like, "You know what? This part of it, I like." I was like, "You know what? It's outside of what they do with Hippolyta, outside of what they do with Tick, I like it." And so when you take Tick out of the show, it excels. It looks really great, and
Which
it's
is
not
weird, right?
right.
Because you want more of Tick, right? Like it's
Yeah,
like you want to know more of his character. Like when they did last week's episode, and you learn of I forget her name, but you learn about the Korean young lady, and you learn about her life, and then how that involves Tick, and then basically it comes out that Tick's gonna die by when he goes back to America, and that kind of bottle. That's like the bottle episode of the season, which kind of goes back to what happened in the episode previous when Tick is going through like the coded puzzle, whatever, and finds out that he's gonna die as well, and he goes, "Oh, how did you know?" Like it's cool, but you want more Tick on screen, you know what I mean? Because the story is so interesting. But this show does a real great job of fleshing out all the other characters. But it's weird because they leave me hanging, wanting more of Tick. And the actor that plays Tick is such a good actor. It's like I want him more on screen. So it's like, how does this show do that? You know?
And so yeah, so that is my beef, and it might not be a huge beef, or it might not be a huge problem for a lot of people. But again, not to knock on what they did with Aunt Hippolyta this episode, because I thought it was great. It's
It was
just that I'm
perfect.
starting to see more and more of of the biggest flaw of the show, where it's quote unquote main character story doesn't matter to the main plot of the show. Well, hasn't, not doesn't matter, hasn't mattered to the main plot of the show. So let me say it that way. Again, it's not that he doesn't matter, but he hasn't mattered in the grand scheme of things.
You know what it seems
The
like?
Go
Sorry
ahead.
about that. But you know what it seems like? It seems like Tick is supposed to be the character that, in every TV show, every movie, almost every book, there's a character that has the eyes that you would have looking through the universe that the thing is
Mm,
set in. It
mm,
seems like that's supposed to be Tick, but at the same time, Tick is so embedded in the universe. It's like, so they play both sides. Like, this is supposed to be your view of this universe with this character. At the same time, we're not really doing that though. We're not really, that's not our purpose for this character, but
right,
we kind of are doing it at the same time.
right.
That's what it seems like to me.
Okay. Well, so I'm just trying to understand. At this point, we've come 7 episodes in. We got what, 3 more? I think at the promo
Mm-hmm.
said 3 more episodes to the end. What again? The biggest thing that happened in this episode with Tick, or to Tick, wasn't him finding out about his aunt. The tattoo on his body. Um, wasn't that. It was more so what happened between him and his dad.
Mm-hmm.
I again, I thought that was a very interesting thing to do. I loved that story. Don't get me. I really did. I love that reveal, or that thing with the family, and I like that as its own thing. Um, but if that's the most interesting thing to happen to Tick in this episode, then you could have as well just left him out of it, to be honest. Because him going to St. Louis. Oh, and one more thing. I know it's probably not a huge problem, but how did Tick get to his aunt so quick?
That was my problem. So, but anyway, let's hop into this and then we'll get there.
Okay.
Trust you me. Yeah, let's hop
So
into it. So
so go ahead, Kyle.
we hop in. We begin with uh the aunt figuring out to turn all the planets on the axis, and then you could open up the top of the
Ori or whatever, the Rory, the
right.
thing,
So
the
the
device.
MacGuffin, basically.
Yes,
So
the MacGuffin.
so we learn every beginning is in time and every limit of extension in space, right? That's what it
Yes,
says, right? And there's some
with
numbers on there.
coordinates.
Yes, there are the coordinates on there. She takes the key, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that time, we get Ruby and what's her name? Christina?
Letty?
No, no, no.
No,
The what?
Christina. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ruby and Christina are having a conversation because we bounced back because we had a bottle episode last episode, and episode before that was when the reveal happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
That William was Christina. So Ruby is expressing, like, basically angry because she developed these real feelings for William, and Christina's like, but everything I said was real, you know. And she's explaining like the Order of the Ancient Dawn, which all these things I like because I feel like all these are like maybe Easter eggs,
Mm-hmm.
or like little breadcrumbs for what's to come, and I like that. Like, it seems like they're seeding things that are piquing my interest for things to come now, right?
Yes.
And we have 3 episodes to the end of the season, so you have to build up for a season finale, right? So I
Yes.
like that. I like this pacing, right? And I like the fact that Ruby didn't get angry that she had sex with Christina.
Yes.
She more so was upset that she developed feelings for William to find out it
Yes, to
wasn't
find out
William.
he, and on
I
top
like
of
that. That was
that,
mature.
yes, on top of that, where I can't give you a thumbs up to that is also the fact that there's the whole thing about the order not liking women or not accepting women, and there's also the fact that the order, that she needed William to teach her magic to impress her father, that ends up seeing that I don't need it. I end
Mhm.
up not needing it, to impress my dad. I can do it on my own. And she surpassed William in sort of a way. And she also wants to look. She's also kind of doing this for two things: revenge for the sheriff or whoever, the cop killing William, um, and she wants to do it because she feels like this is her birthright. You know, just as much as it is Tick's birthright, but it's more hers because she is Hiram's daughter. Is it Hiram? Yeah, she's Hiram's daughter. The other thing I think the very start of the episode was the nightmare or the dream sequence with Letty having the same dream with Tick. You know, where she wakes up, or in her version of the dream, she's chasing.
The house is burning.
Yeah, she's chasing Shorty through the house, and she finds out she's pregnant in that dream. And what I thought was interesting was her leaving out that detail.
Yeah,
when she tells Tick,
that was very interesting.
I thought it was interesting, and I was like, okay.
Now, did it seem like Tick kind of already knew from the dream that she was pregnant? Kind of was wondering why, because it seemed like Tick was like, it seems like something's missing in your story. Like the look on his face seemed like you're leaving something out, or I saw something different in a dream, or I saw something else.
I think it's more so, like, I agree with you. It's more so, hey, well, I know you had a dream, and I know there was more to it, because in my dream, you know, there was something else that I was missing. So what are you leaving out? What are you hiding? And I think that's where Tick was. Not necessarily he knew what it was. He knew she was hiding something, but he didn't know exactly what it was. Ruby, again, asking for the whole truth from Christina is something that I thought was very interesting, because again, between Ruby and Letty, there's things that they both have things, right, at this point, that they're both hiding from each other, which in their scene together they try to talk about, closer to their scene together, they try to talk about, but then they also kind of leave out.
Yeah, it's but like, Ruby already has an idea that Letty is pregnant. Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yes. Also, the fact that Christina may have told her what's really going on when she says it involves, in the beginning, in their beginning, it was like, well, she's like, tell me the truth of everything. And she's like, I'll tell you, but it involves your family. So I think that Ruby kind of has an idea, but she's just not probing, and she doesn't care. What? Not that she doesn't care enough to know. She just doesn't. She just doesn't. She's not pressing it, because it's like, it's either you tell me or you don't. You know, if you don't want to tell me, just know I know. That's what it is to me. But moving on from Ruby and Letty for a second, let's talk about Tick's journey. Him going to St. Louis, or him deciding to go to St. Louis, or let's talk about the whole. You know what? I think I want to talk about Montrose for a little bit. Montrose is the guy's guy. You know, he's the dad. He's that guy's guy, where he's like, he's such a hardened guy, and him being in love, or him finding out things about himself, is what is his punished Tick for that. And I thought that was very interesting when Tick had that moment with Letty, and he's like, all this time he was beating me and whooping my ass, and I thought he was doing that because he cared about me, trying not to get me soft, but he was doing it because he couldn't stand himself, and he didn't want that for me. It's either he didn't want that for him, or he was just punishing him for that. And that, again, his acting is phenomenal.
I thought both actors acting was phenomenal in the scene, because it is telling in our community, especially. So I didn't live through the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, the 60s that this is taking place, right? But I could honestly tell you, I had family that has, right? I could tell you I've been Black my whole life. I lived here in Baltimore. I lived in South Carolina, and I could tell you for a large period of time, especially in the South, even still now in the South, it's strongly frowned upon for African-American male to be homosexual, gay, or even a woman to be gay, lesbian, like, so it was interesting, because when he was basically outed by his brother, by his son, the first thing he does is flex his muscles. You know what I mean? He takes off his shirt.
Yeah, I'm still your father. I'm still your father, and he flexes. And
like he had to show how masculine he still was.
Yes.
And I thought it was interesting, because I was like, this is so interesting. First, nobody wants to be outed. Like, nobody wants to be outed. Like, people rather
everyone kind of wants to control their narrative
at their own time, and it's already a very sensitive time when somebody does come out the closet. So for his son to basically come over there, because he even said, "Why did you come here?" You know what I mean? Like, that was such a powerful scene and so telling, because here's your son. No matter what, no matter, like, there's some barrier between the two of them, right? But even regardless of that barrier, he loves his son. He's proud of his son. His son is very intelligent. His son served in the military. He didn't get drafted. He volunteered. His son is
Right.
book smart as can be, right? His son is a braithwaite. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? So his son is an heir to something. You know what I mean? So he has tons of things to be proud of his son about. And
Right.
to have his son basically look down on him because of who he's attracted to, it's like a huge punch in the nuts to begin with. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I'm still your daddy, so I still have to show the sign of dominance, and I'm
And
still a
I'll
black
whoop your
man, so I
ass
have
if
to
I
show
have
the
to.
sign of
Right.
dominance.
Right.
And
Right.
we're black in this time where segregation and Jim Crow and everything else. So I have to show this sign of brilliant writing, completely brilliant writing. Can't take that away. I thought that was real good. I thought I forget the actor who played Omar, who's playing the father on this, but the expressions that he showed.
Michael K. Williams.
Yeah,
Michael K. Williams. Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant how even when he's flexing and trying to show his muscles and everything, like the look on his face, like that hurt and that awe, like that was a perfect look that they did. That was great. That was outstanding acting. I also want to point out, I thought it was interesting they pointed out that Tick lived through the Tulsa riots as well.
But I think he was a kid. He was a child at the point, so he wasn't an adult. His family, his mom lived through it and survived it. But it could have been a case of where she escaped the master, and she was pregnant at the time she left, right?
I think that's what came out later, but I just thought it was interesting that they brought that out about Tick living through the Tulsa riots. I was like, that's good that they shoehorned that in. Like, it wasn't a forced shoehorn. I just thought it was a good shoehorn in that you bring that in. And again, so all right, I'll point this out now. So from them pointing that out, I know the history of the Tulsa riot, right? Even prior to like the Black Wall Street, the burning there, what happened, how that community was thriving so much. There's a lot of people who didn't, right? There's a lot of people who watched the show who probably didn't even watch Watchmen, right? Which is fine. But I like how they throw things out in this show, and you have to go research it. And that's where the entertainment factor, from what we were talking about at the top of the show, which I waited till now to talk about, happens. Because in it like this, I realized there's two, you have to, it has to entertain you from two different ways. You have to really be ready to hit the pause button on the show and Google and research certain things on the show if you're not aware of what certain hanging threads they say. And that's why I was able to enjoy this episode more than others in the past. Is I went from, okay, I'm not going to enjoy this show from face value like I would enjoy a great show like Game of Thrones. Yes, I'm kind of making fun of the guy from the troll call earlier because he wanted to say Game of Thrones was a great show, which it was, except for the last season. But yeah, so I realized that about the show. Like, whenever certain things are said or certain things are like constantly repeated, like certain themes or whatever, just pause and Google, see what it's saying, and then go back and watch. Like, if you're trying to watch this show like the A to B to C show, if you try to do that, you probably won't enjoy it as much. Instead of, why did they say this twice? Let me Google and see what this is about. You know what I mean? Or why is that picture right there and they kind of focused in and then zoomed out of it? Let me Google and see what that says. Which is fine. This episode was entertaining, so it was fun to do that. You know what I mean? Previous episodes didn't seem that way. Also, we learned that Ruby moved out. The show did a good job of catching the audience up with what happened between the bottle episode of last week and then the previous episode, because the bottle episode didn't do much catching up between episode 5 and now episode 7. The bottle episode was more character development for Tick. But I thought that this show did a real good job catching you up from episode 5 to now. There was a lot of great character development in this episode with Ruby, Hippolyta, Tick, which is weird because the show does a good job developing Tick as a character without having Tick on screen.
I don't think so. I don't think there's anything that Tick has done on this show that I like at all. I'm sorry. Except for the thing last week where he says we are both monsters, or we've done things, but that doesn't make us monsters. I thought that was I think his acting is great again, but I don't think the show has done anything for me to care about enough about Tick. Tick is gonna die, okay, and
see, that's the thing. I think the show develops Tick through other characters, which is weird. I've never seen that. I don't
and
think I've seen
that's
that done
fantastic
before.
that you think that, and I'm sure there are plenty of people that think that, but I don't think this is that show that does that. You see, what you're saying is trying to give this show smart merits for Tick. I don't think it's done anything for Tick that I care enough about. Like, honestly, to me personally, this show can exist without Tick on it.
I agree.
This show can exist,
and that's why I said what I said earlier. I
without
think the
Atticus
show
on it.
And I agree. That's why I said what I said earlier, which is I think the show is written where it's supposed to be life in this universe through Tick's lens, islands, right? It's not supposed to be like a center on Tick, even though Tick is supposed to be the main character. But I think some kind of way when they wrote the show with Tick's island. Like, basically, this is how Tick is viewing this world.
I don't know. I feel like you're giving it too much credit. I don't think it gets that. I don't think it deserves that. I think it should show me more, but it's not doing that for me. I think you're giving the show way too much credit. Again, the moments for Tick on this episode, again, are the moments with his dad, where they have like a real father-son, type of thing, where it's like, oh, you beat me for so long in my life to tell me not to make me soft, and I thought you cared about me. Other than that, and that acting in that moment, the acting when he comes up to him and he goes, did mom know? Where he's like, yes. And all of that, other than all of that in that moment, in those two moments, I don't think anything Tick did in this show, in this episode, I cared about. Him going to St. Louis to find out about his family, didn't care nothing about. Him finding the tattoo, him finding the birthmark on his back, didn't care about, because again, all those things are happening that I don't care about. Let me tell you, did I care about Letty and did I care about Ruby and all their moments together? Yes, I thought it was very fantastic. Didn't really care about Aunt Hippolyta from the beginning, but in that last 15 to 20 minutes where she's going through her story, where she's developing herself and she's growing.
We're going to get to that.
And she's growing. I loved. We can get to it right now. So everything that happened with her,
we got a lot more happening before we get to that.
A lot more. Nothing else happened on
we had
this episode.
We learned about the book was burnt in the massacre. Basically, the MacGuffin of this episode, right? We learned that, right?
I really think you're giving the show way too much credit. But go ahead, man. We're doing this together, so let me not cut you off.
Yeah. So look, we learned in the book that the MacGuffin of this episode, right? So I guess the MacGuffin of this season. Tick is looking for, and Christina's looking for this book, and we learned that it was burnt.
Christina's looking for pages.
Yeah, she's looking for
because
pages.
all Christina knows at this point is pages. Tick knows that his mom ran away with a book because him and Letty have the same dream, and she's holding a book in her hand, and they figure out it's the Book of Names. That's it.
Right. So they go to the house, and he goes visit his aunt. His aunt mentions that the book was burnt down, was burned up in the house. Now, about the dream with the house burning, was that house supposed to be what burnt? The house burning, is that the house that burnt in the Oklahoma massacre, in the Tulsa massacre?
Apparently no. That dream is a reflection of the first time. I think the older Braithwaite tried to, do the ritual, and so the house burned. Okay. And so I think that's just the representation of that old house, because the second time Hiram tries to do the ritual, the house crumbles. Okay. You see, I also had a problem. Hold on, I had a problem with that, right? Because when Hippolyta goes to the house, and she just happens to spot things, and I'm like, you know what? Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
It was very on the nose. I thought it was very on the nose as well. It was very on the nose. I give you that. Mind you, J.J. Abrams is involved in this, so
I guess.
Come on, you got to give it what it is. What it is, and it's TV. Right. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Yeah. So it's TV, and I think the show is finally finding its footing. So I'm going to give it credit right now. So Tick is in Mayfield. No. She's in Mayfield. Hippolyta's in Mayfield. Tick is in St. Louis, or it's the other way around. Then he bounced back to Letty, and something interesting happened in here. So I don't know how many people in here lived in the South ever in their life. I have. It was not really ladylike for women to curse to begin with, and then Letty was cursing in front of kids when she was playing cards with the kids, and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Oh,
They're
she
doing a
said,
period piece, but
yeah, she
she
said
said, "I'm
one
come back and whip
thing.
you." Yeah, but that that's not a Southern thing, especially back then. You know what I mean? Like
In
maybe
Chicago.
more now, huh?
In Chicago. In Chicago. The show is happening in Chicago.
Yeah, but that especially in our
I,
culture, that was like a thing that
it's
our culture really didn't do. Especially
it,
women was a curse, B curse in front of children. Like so,
right.
that like I had to write that down. Like that was interesting, because that was not a normal thing. B Letty kind of gave let on that she was pregnant when she was kind of sick by the garlic inside of the.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess she was making spaghetti. Um, Ruby appears to be a spy, like she's spying on Letty, who's on the
You
phone.
know what? That could be a thing. That could be an interesting thing. Is Ruby spying for? Because again, Christina needs the pages, and they know it's a book, and so is Ruby now spying? That's kind of could be an interesting thing. But again, it's inconsequential in the greater scheme of things because I think the most important thing of this episode is Aunt Hippolyta. But again, those are little small things that I guess we could talk about, but inconsequential to me.
Well, I mean, think about this. We have a lot of people in our race and in our culture who they get a taste of, I would guess, white society, and they begin
Mhm.
telling their white counterparts things that are going on in our society and letting them in on different things that's going on with us. And that's how they get a perception of us, right? So I think that was a pretty good mirror of something, right? Because Ruby is somebody who was able to walk around as a white woman at a period of
Yes.
time, right? And she
Right.
was
Right.
in a relationship with a quote unquote white man who came out to be Christina, right? So I thought that was a pretty decent mirroring, like a deep memory. I wouldn't say deep, but it was a mirror of life imitating art, right? Or art imitating life,
Right.
right? Let's see. I thought this show did a real good job at not showing racism throughout this whole episode, or I wouldn't say not showing racism, not beating me down over the head to make me realize racism is going on in this time period. I thought this show did a real good
Yes.
job at that. Um, I thought the show did a real good job at the African history of acknowledging astrology because a lot of the great astrologers, such as the people from Kemet, the people from Kush, what a lot of us call now Egypt and so forth, they were astrologers, you know. So I thought that was pretty cool that they started that theme early. Um, let's see. I thought it was pretty stupid with the police. When the police came in, when they saw Aunt Hippolyta messing with the MacGuffin of this episode, with the key and turn the key, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And they went and pointed the gun instantly. I'm like, "Dude, are you guys that stupid? Like, instead of trying to figure out what this is and what's going on, how is this working, you're going to try to shoot and kill the person who got it to work, and you don't even know what
So
this is."
about
I
that,
was like, "That was
about that,
dumb." Go for
I
it.
think it's more so they are part of this organization, right? The cops are part of
Mm-hmm.
this organization, and they're all watching this artifact, and they've been told not to mess with it. So I'm guessing they're just doing following orders. They're not supposed to mess with it. They're not messing with it. So I think that I'm okay with that. I'm okay
Okay.
with that. I'm okay with them being racist cops and them just being like, oh wait, we're supposed to be watching this thing and not letting anybody mess with it. So we're gonna do our jobs and we're gonna watch this and we're not, like how did you turn this on? How did you know? Because again, I think again that's a thing where it didn't beat you over the head with racism because they were
Mm-hmm.
surprised that a black woman was able to
Mm-hmm.
turn this machine on. So it's how were you able? Because I think that's the question: is how were you able to make this work? Was the
Mm-hmm.
question they asked,
Yeah.
and a lot of them don't know that the Ori, that little astronomy set is connected to this. The same.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the underlings, because I'm looking at those cops as underlings, and a lot of the other underlings don't know that the Ori is connected to that big observatory machine, and so they're not able to. They don't know the inner workings and the understanding of it. So they're just doing their job. And so how are you able to turn it on? Is how was this black woman able to do that? And I thought that was very powerful. And again, very very. it wasn't as on the nose as everything they've done with
Mhm.
the racism on this show, but that was a very, very important thing to note. And I thought that was really
Yeah.
smart. And then from that point on, I love this episode.
Yes,
But
because the show
up to
went.
that,
Yeah, because this show went. Well, I'm going to say I like this episode a lot, but I did a lot of pausing and a lot of relooking and a
you
lot of
see,
replaying. And but see,
see,
that's where I say that's not really entertaining. You know what I
right,
mean? You
right.
you could, and there's a difference between being intellectual and being entertaining. And I had to make that entertaining for me to enjoy the show, which is fine. As
But
you
not
know, I do
everyone
a
wants
lot
to
of
do that.
research to begin with for a living. So
Yeah, but not everyone
yeah,
wants to do that. And I think there
exactly
are
my
people who
point.
just want to watch a show
And be
and watch it,
entertained.
and get it, and be entertained by it. If I'm watching a show like Power, this is no knock to Power and what Power has done in terms of TV. But if I'm watching a show like Power, I'm not going to want to stop. I just want to watch it to be entertained by it. You put out Lovecraft, on this channel as as the next show after HBO's
Watchmen.
Watch. And I think you're kind of telling people that this is where you're going and you need them to grab things. So yes, there will be the need to pause. This is not, but then you also put it out as an entertaining show. So to me, they're having the problem of balancing both.
Yeah. And I agree. But here's the thing: this show was the best episode of the season to me, aside from last week's episode, right?
Right.
But I set last week's episode aside because to me, last week's episode was a great episode of TV, and it was like I don't put it on par with this season. But this episode was the best episode of this season to me because it's on par with the rest of the show. And I also try to enjoy it from a different lens. Now, for me, like when I watch a show, like let's say Watchmen, I will watch one episode of Watchmen twice to three times before we would cast on it. Right, the first time I'm watching just to enjoy it. Second time I'm watching and just dissecting stuff. With this show, I can't really watch and enjoy without dissecting. What does this mean? What does that mean? Without really coming away with something. Right now, to
Right.
me, that's not really entertaining. It's good because you're making me do some research on some things, but is that really entertaining? You know what I mean? Like
Right.
if somebody like let's say my mother or my sister or somebody, or if I try to refer the show to somebody to watch, are they going to actually take time to watch the show when it comes on at night on a Sunday night to watch that show and be entertained? And are they going to pause and Google this and Google that and all that kind of stuff? Like probably not. I'm not at this point. I'm not bashing the show because there's a lot more to talk about. And one of the things is with Josephine Baker. Because at this point I wrote down in all caps, this is a great episode of the show because this is when the alien woman lady came up and said, who do you want to be, or where do you want to be, or name yourself, right? And she said, I want to dance with Josephine Baker. So when she said Josephine Baker, at this point I paused the show. I
Right.
went on my phone, I Googled Josephine Baker, right? Because I knew who Josephine Baker was, but that was years ago. I was in a play at the Arena Players called Black Faces. I played BB King, and there was somebody else who played Josephine Baker, and I learned about Josephine Baker from this play I was in. Right, this is pre 9/11 when I was in that play. So this is where I learned the woman in St. Louis when Hippolyta was riding by on a motorcycle was supposed to have been a direct reflection of Josephine Baker, because Josephine Baker rode through the Jim Crow South on a motorcycle, which was cool, right? I didn't know that, right? Actually, I think I was said in the play, but anyway, I didn't know that, right? So also Josephine Baker was considered a French-born, American-born French entertainer. They didn't, and none of the things it actually says her as African American, which makes it powerful when it says name yourself. When the alien kept saying name yourself, who do you want to be? Name yourself, right? Josephine Baker was a Freemason, a civil rights activist, died in 1975. And like I said earlier, Josephine Baker rode a motorcycle through the Jim Crow South, which was definitely something that was not normal. Like even in the show, I don't don't know if you got the same vibe when the lady rolled by on the motorcycle and looked at her in the car and kept driving. I was like, that seems kind of out of place. You know what I mean?
Right. It did. I thought it was
So
out of place to see that because again, this is in this era and in this show, it's not something that is a common thing to see. So I thought that was kind of out of place. Yeah.
yeah,
So
and
she gets to where was she? Kansas?
no, she went to France. She went to
No, no,
France
no,
and
no,
was
no. I'm
talking
saying
about
where did um Aunt Hippolyta go?
St.
Where
Louis.
was that? That
She
was
was in
in St.
St.
Louis.
Louis.
Okay, yeah,
That
she
was
was
in
in
St.
St.
Louis.
Louis. Yeah, it took her to St. Louis. Um, yeah, so watching her growth, personal growth in that little 15-20 minute stretch, her being Josephine Baker, or no, her dancing with Josephine Baker and going through all of that and getting to express herself to Josephine, because in that scene where she's talking to Josephine and is like, I see you, I see what it is you're dealing with, and all of that good stuff, and then taking it a step further and saying, well, I get it too, because I am this person. I have been this person and I've been small, I've been reduced, I've been shrunk, and I don't like it. I hate everybody, but I also hate me for the fact that I let myself continually be shrunk by my society, by my issues. And then I think, she kind of insinuated that her husband, did aided to some of the parts of her
Well, they
being
didn't get
funny.
there yet. They didn't get to that reveal yet.
No, she insinuated it. I'm not saying she
Yeah.
said it. She insinuated, like when she said the things, personal things.
Yeah,
And
she
we
said
get
they
to
lynched me without a noose, without using a noose, and let me think that it was freedom.
right. And
I
this
thought
is
that was
the first
powerful.
time where she's felt real freedom and she's seen what it's like and what it can do to her or for her. And then you leave that. And then I think the next place she went to was the African tribe. So quick question. Do you think she was fighting French invaders? Because they looked French to me.
They did. They looked like French invaders, and then they looked like European discoverers at the same time. Because some
And
of
then
them
they
had
kind of
that
looked
James Bond outfit,
southern, like the
not James
southern.
Bond, Indiana Jones outfit. Sorry.
Yes, and they kind of look like southern. What would you call not the Union? The Union?
It
No,
looked like
no.
they were Union and Confederate soldiers. It did.
Yes,
It did look like
they
some.
did
It
look
was a little
Confederate.
bit
My
of
bad. They looked a little bit of Confederate soldiers, especially I think the general or the head she killed, the guy whose head she cut off, with the hat. So I was getting a mix of all of that, the French invaders, the Confederates, and there was a bunch of that. And we went to that, and again, in that little moment where she's fighting, I think Navia or whatever the lady's name was, and she's growing in that scene, and I thought it was very powerful because it was more than just her becoming a warrior or a capable enough warrior. It was her picking herself up every time she fell. That is something powerful. That is something you want to teach. That is something you want girls to see, because you're very capable of being all of it. And then in that moment, after they defeated the first group of soldiers, she turns around to the other soldiers, to her little warriors, and she says, they tell us not to be loud because women are not supposed to be loud. And she, do you have that written? I feel like you have that written down. They tell us not to be loud because women are not supposed to be loud. They tell us we can't love the way we're supposed to because women are not supposed to. And she goes into that speech, and I love it.
Yeah.
When I go ahead.
That was some of the best TV I've seen this year. That moment alone, like that moment was so empowering because of the. I don't want to say double entendres, but there was so many different levels to that conversation that was dope, and I loved it.
Right.
And I
So
know you
there's
probably feel different.
no. In that little, I told you, in that moment when she goes into the void or goes into the portal, everything that happened to her inside of that, I loved. When they come out and when Tick comes out and grabs everything else except the comic book, I was like, get the fuck out of here. But I felt like that was done for. Oh, they need to continue the story next weekend.
Yeah,
So
3 episodes, you have to get to a place. So that had to be done.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
But
It's
also,
like
hang on, that was also done for another reason too, for us, the viewer.
because
Because yeah,
hold on. Yeah, don't spoil it because it's very interesting with how it goes. It's how smart it does. So the next thing that happens to her after she leaves that is she says, I am Hippolyta. I am George Freeman's wife. And she wakes
Mhm.
up in bed, in the beginning of which was technically the day before George traveled with them.
Yeah,
That was how they woke up. And they have
it's
this
the
little
pilot.
conversation.
Hmm.
And George said, she then reveals that, George is part of also the reason why she's felt small. And George apologizes and he says, no, you're more than George Freeman's wife. I kind of shrunk you so you could be the wife, so you could be X, Y, and Z. And I'm sorry for that. And, that was very, very powerful. That was amazing
Hmm.
in my perception. Again, where he apologized to his wife for doing what he did so that he could create a family. That was, it's
Yeah,
I thought that was. I
that
thought
was
that was. Go ahead.
that was genius. It was genius.
Yes,
Oh.
and
So
so
I took some notes too, but go for it.
this is so. At the end of that, what I loved was they held hands right together to go into the next phase of
Hmm.
her growth. And inside of the next phase of her growth, she ends up in this costume, this astronomer, astronomers. No, not I wouldn't call it astronomer. Is it an astronomer? No, no, no. It's not an
Yeah,
astronomer. Oh,
it's like
what's
an
the word?
astronaut.
Astronaut's costume,
Yeah,
which mimics her daughter's drawing of the
yeah.
astronaut going to space and to Mars and all that good stuff. And I thought that was very powerful. Where when the entity came and asked her again, so you've made yourself, you found yourself, or you've named yourself. Where do you what we can assimilate you now into our society? You don't need the things in your arm anymore. And she's like, home. That's such a strange word. How am I supposed to contain everything that I am now, everything that I've learned now into that? All of those questions that were coming into her is like, I'm this person. I have become this person. I've become so big. How am I supposed to go back to being so small? That is very, very interesting. And that is also a good question to ask and to leave the viewers with. Now,
Right.
we don't know what she chose. And I thought it was
Well,
brilliant for them
let
to
me
show
jump
us
in
that.
real quick. So there were some powerful things that came in, right? And you definitely tapped on those things, right? So the conversation with George, like you mentioned, um, and her talk about I hate me. And I thought everything that she said speaks to today, right? So I'm married. And I think and what she said really resonated to me as a husband. And I look at a lot of the work that my wife does and that she sacrifices, and we had three beautiful daughters, right? And I thought about that, and I was like, um, when she said, "I have the freedom of a well-kept slave," and she has to find freedom for herself, and uh, she's talking to George about the multi-world theory, which to me it sounds like the multi-race, multiverse theory, right?
Mhm.
And you think about all the things that we do as a society, right? Which being a man, we go out, we work, right? You and I, we go to the gym. You and I talk about things that we do at the gym, stuff like that. Reason why we cast it a little bit later on today was because I went to Vitamin Shop to pick up some protein powder, right? So, so like like things that we do, the the different programs and the different things I'm involved in my personal life outside of here, me being a public servant of Baltimore City, everything else, and all those things. Think about and how does that make my wife feel, right? Does that take away her identity? Does that make her feel smaller, right? Because somebody has to stay here with the kids when I'm out doing everything I'm doing, right? Not doing anything like nefarious or anything, but I'm out basically building a brand for myself. And you know what I mean? Does that make my wife smaller when I'm casting on here, or when I'm casting on the two other casts that I'm on? Like, does that take away from her? Does that make her feel smaller? You know what I mean? When I went and got my PhD, all the sacrifices that she had to make for me having to go for my residencies and all that good stuff, did that make her feel small? So like, it was pretty powerful when you think about it, because it resonates today. Like even today, like when we go on these marches for Black Lives Matter and everything else, does that make your partner feel smaller? You know what I mean? Like, because somebody has to stay home. Somebody's dream has to get pushed to the back burner. Somebody's identity is lost. Like, I'm a therapist, right? So one thing that happens, because I had to meet with somebody over the weekend who is going through adjustment disorder, and his wife left him. Uh, with all the kids, and they were together for 25 years or so on. And this person is having issues with finding himself right now. So because he felt small throughout the relationship, because he worked at whatever and she had a professional job, and he sacrificed everything to be a stay-at-home dad and all that kind of stuff, while she had a real career and everything, and he's making sacrifices to help with the kids. And now she left him and took the kids, and he lost himself, right? So he made himself feel smaller, which I think is interesting as a society, how even in our best efforts trying to fit into the society, we make a partner feel small. So I just thought that was
Mhm.
very powerful. Also, I thought it was pretty interesting. When she said she feels like she's shrinking, right? Because she kept making herself small for him.
Mhm.
When she was like, "No, I'm not." When she named herself from Hippolyta Freeman to Hippolyta the Discoverer, and they
Mhm.
gave her that option to going back. And I thought of Nas's song from Godson, "If Heaven Was a Mile Away."
Right.
Would I pack up this bag and leave this world, and how? Or what I consider staying in this hell of you. It's not you, it's the things you do. Like I just thought it was interesting, like how this really made me feel that way, because it was like, what if you had the knowledge and if you had the ability to go to heaven, would you sacrifice it all to live in the limits that you have right now? And have like voluntarily having that noose placed around your neck every day and calling it freedom, like Hippolyta said earlier. And then they played Sun Ra. They played one of his poems towards the end, when they was talking about, I don't what was it I do not come to you as the reality, I come to you as the myth, right? And I thought that was pretty cool, because we have this myth of freedom. I was on a podcast yesterday, on this podcast I do on Sundays, called The Walker Experience, and we talked briefly about us as a people, Black people, and the different things that we're fighting for, right? So we just want police reform. Like, that's our main thing, right? We just want to be treated equal. We do not like, but what happens? You have a multi-billion-dollar company called the NFL. These owners are multimillionaires, billionaires, and they have the power to put money into legislation, not legislation, but for what is it called? Lobbying. They have money to put into lobbying to actually call in the practices of the fraternal order police and so on and so forth. But instead of taking the time to actually look into the majority of the players that are Black and look into issues that really affect them, those players and their families, they go, "Oh no, we'll play the Negro national anthem." Why? Because we're going to give you the myth of freedom. We're going to give you the myth of we care. We're going to give you the myth of equality. Not, we're going to actually provide you equality, like even in the workplace, right? So I have what, 5 degrees now, including a PhD. I have the myth of being treated equal, right? I have the myth of being able to move up. I have the myth of being able to make as much money or more money as my white counterparts. But with all my education and everything, a place like Wells Fargo can tell me we can't find anybody good enough to put on our board of directors that's Black. And they could sit there and poke their chest out and be proud of it. Now, with all these colleges that we have, right? Morgan, Howard, and so on and so forth. You mean to tell me all these business and finance majors you can't put on there? It's the myth, right? They come to us with the myth of freedom and equality, but in reality, they don't. Like, we have we want to
Wow.
like,
Is
and
everything
then you have
okay over
to figure out a way how to separate it even further, huh?
there? No, I was just asking if everything was okay over in your end. But yeah, so I mean, ultimately, I get it. I get the whole moment with her and George, and I get everything that was going on, and I get everything that was happening. I loved it. Again, ultimately, love that part of the episode. And then once it ends, we're back reminded that this is where we are, and it becomes Lovecraft country again. And of course, the book in his hand, where it's like a hint. It's it's you had that brilliant moment in this big
Mm-hmm.
episode of in my opinion, of boring stuff, and then the brilliance and the exciting stuff that happens there, for them to come. And I did like that we kind of don't know what she chose. We only saw Tick coming out of the portal, where she doesn't necessarily make a decision, or we don't know if she does make a decision, because everything that goes on with her. And we talked about how it ended with Tick finding everything possible, closing the portal, doing everything right, and
Mm-hmm.
missing maybe the most important part of that, of
Which was that
cleaning
book.
the scene, which is the comic book drawn by Diana. And now she, well, that's the end of the episode. He runs out, and the next phase of it is, or from the promo from next week. Did you happen to watch next week promo?
I didn't, but what I thought was cool was with Hippolyta, with her astronaut outfit. Did you notice the globe circling her? The
Yes.
universe circling her. I thought that was pretty
Yes.
cool and pretty telling because that's the theory of what 360. We're all part of this universe. We stay grounded. That whole thing. I'm not going to get into that whole thing right now
All
on
right.
this series, but I just thought it was pretty cool and pretty telling, like that they would actually show that on TV. In that
Cool.
idea of being
Right.
one with the universe.
Yeah, I get that. And again, she did kind of spin out and become like a cluster of stars. So maybe she did
Mm-hmm.
make a decision. Maybe she didn't. We don't know. But yeah, let's look at the promo for next week and kind of like have a chat about that before we go. All right. So this is the promo for next week. Letting that play out.
Okay. Uh, boy. This is interesting. Okay.
It looks like she messed with her baby.
Yeah. I also find it interesting. We haven't really seen religion in this show this whole season, and that they're in the church in this episode. Like Letty's in the church in this episode.
Right. Right.
I do find it interesting. Hmm.
So there it is. And in the actual, on HBO, when, because I watched it at the end when it did its thing, she's praying and asking God to kind of like come into their situation and kind of save them. At this point, as you said, we haven't seen anything about religion, but now she's asking for it. So, the cops have caught up to Diana. Black woman crosses the line is something you saw there, and in the headlines, and you saw. Well, I'm guessing we're getting more of Ruby and Christina, and Ruby being a white woman. That's going to continue. As you said when you were highlighting something, when certain black people taste, like, or get that taste of, the whiteness or the white approval, they tend to, you know what? Let's just wait till the next episode. But anyways, Kyle, thank you for coming. Thank you for breaking down this episode as beautifully as you did. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having a different objection or a different view than I did. Because again, to me, this episode was a lot of empty fluff till we got to Hippolyta. If I did this on my own, I would just tell people I didn't care about the beginning of it till we got to Hippolyta and her growth, and her opening up. And I thought that part of the episode, that part of the show was beautiful. Everything else you can miss me with. Like, you can cut this episode to a 30-minute episode for real and just have Hippolyta's thing happen. And little, like, maybe 35 minutes, because the 5 minutes of Tick, his dad, the sisters, Ruby, you can cut that or trim that a little bit. This episode didn't need to become an hour, but it is what it is. We are where we are. 3 more episodes to the end. Hopefully we're going to get a lot more answers, and we're not going to have questions leading all the way to the end. I said this on the last show. I was like, if we get a show where it's, if we get a show where it's more, if we have to wait to the end to have this huge payoff, I am not going to like it. But here we are, at this point, we're still kind of asking questions, especially with our lead character, which is Tick. You know, um, it'll be interesting to see how it ends. Anything else you want to say before we leave?
Don't forget your troll call, okay? For all those trolls and those people who want to leave negative comments, we invite you to do so. We encourage you to do so.
Right.
Come on, leave those comments, like and share. Tell your other troll friends to come from underneath that bridge, and we're going to address you next week.
Right. Click the subscribe button. Make sure you click the subscribe button. Subscribe, like, and share. As Kyle said. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for social media at Mo Crosby at Berkeley for us
at Earth 2 Comic Cast. Let's not forget that. Thank you for watching, and we will